Hi friends! Today I'd like to do a retrospective on my attempted rim-to-rim-to-rim hike in the Grand Canyon that ended with a medevac due to rhabdomyolysis. And I want to share the things that worked, that didn't, the things I'd change the next time I try it, and some of the tips and tricks I learned, so hopefully they can help you if you're planning a trip. Before we get into that, a quick introduction for those of you who I don't know yet. My name's Spencer, I live in Seattle, and I am an avid hiker, camper, and backpacker. I love getting out to the outdoors any chance I get. This was not my first time in the Grand Canyon. I'd hiked in the canyon before, and it also wasn't my first time doing a long distance through hike in a single day. I've hiked the enchantments and other hikes. So I had a sense of what I was getting into, and I had been preparing for it for multiple months, and yet the Grand Canyon is just a different ballgame. No matter how in shape you are, how prepared you are, the canyon can throw things at you, literally and figuratively, that just are going to adjust your hike. And so today, I want to talk about things like the planning, how I chose when to go, the food, a tip that I didn't learn until the day before about the taxi, what hotel floor to stay at, things like that. So without further ado, let's jump into it. The first thing that I want to talk about is when to hike, when in the calendar year. And this is something that worked for me and I would do again. There's a lot of factors playing in as you think about when to hike, the biggest being weather and conditions on the trail. In the winter, it's cold and you've got snow. In the summer, it's incredibly and deadly hot. So there's this sweet Goldilocks spot at the beginning of the season and the end of the season. Originally, I had planned to hike in October of 2023. However, due to a pretty time-consuming and stressful desk job, I knew I wasn't in shape. And so in August of 2023, I bumped my hike from October to April of 2024. What I was aiming for was the window where temperatures weren't too extreme, but where I was likely to not be overly cold, but I wasn't going to be hiking in too much snow or any snow on the North Rim. I planned my hike for the weekend of April 27th, 28th, and that ended up being just a perfect spot for me. One of the ways I planned this is the National Park, the Grand Canyon National Park website, shows a chart of temperatures. I also then wanted to think about daylight hours and things like that. One thing I would do again, if possible, is I was flexible on the exact day I went. I had multiple days where I could hike the canyon. That helped because earlier in the week, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of that week, temperatures soared and got into the 90s down in the bottom of the canyon. And while that's lower than they can get in the hot heat of summer, 90 was warmer than the 70s I was hoping to hike in. I was able to delay a little bit, and there was a day of rain, so it was nice that I could take the time and choose my exact day based off of the forecast. When I ended up hiking, the forecast was that it would be 28 degrees when I started on the South Rim, and that at the bottom of the canyon would be in the mid to high 70s. This was pretty perfect weather. So, if I had it to do over again, I would take that last week of April, or that time slot, because weather was great. There was snow on the North Rim, but not on the trail. And so that was all okay. Now, the next thing I had to think about was when exactly in the day do I want to hike? And that plays into daylight hours and temperatures, but one of the goals is to be through the box before 10 a.m. The box is the hottest part of the canyon, and you want to be through there before 10 before it gets too hot. Now, for me, I ended up starting at 4:42 a.m. Down the South Kanab Trail, and this was ideal. I could have started earlier to be through the box even sooner, but I wanted to make sure that I got to see sunrise. So for my day, and based off of sunrise, by starting then, I was down about Uwa Point when the sun started to peak up, down to Skeleton Point, but I actually was into the box and a little bit through it before the sun fully crested and I was hiking in full daylight, because as it was coming up, I was going down. So that worked well for me. Now, another thing to think about as you're doing all this planning is whether to do a single day hike or a multi-day hike. And in this case, I chose to do a single day hike where I attempted to do rim to rim to rim, all within about 24 hours. And I would choose to do that again, although I'd also like to go back and do multiple days of hiking. Now, why do a single day hike? Well, there's the challenge of it, seeing if you can do it, enjoying that challenge and the experience. But also a single day hike keeps you from having to get permits and finding places to stay, either permits for the campground or trying to get a reservation at Phantom Ranch. So the other advantage I found of a single day hike, because I had thought about doing it in 2 days and camping on the North Rim, is then I didn't have to carry all of my camping gear. So I got a lighter pack that allowed me to go faster and further. So that was the decision. And I know on my original video, many people have said, why would you hike it so fast? Why wouldn't you take the time to enjoy? In this case, I wanted to push myself. I knew I was capable under good circumstances, and I didn't have the permits. So that's part of why I chose to do a single day hike. But that's not for everyone. And if you can get the permits, if you can break it into multiple days, definitely do that. Or if you want to carry all of your gear, I'd say go ahead and do that. Now, the next thing that worked for me, but I would make changes, is conditioning. Normally, I would have been in better shape from hiking outdoors a bunch. But as I mentioned, I'd been at a desk job, really stuck on Zoom meetings the whole time. And so I wasn't in the shape I wanted to be, hence pushing from October of the previous year to April of the next. I started conditioning 5 months in advance, and I started in the gym. One of the downsides of conditioning in Seattle in the winter is it's wet, it's rainy, it's snowy, there's avalanche danger in the mountains. So I did most of my conditioning in the gym. I used a stair machine and I used a treadmill, and then I used a weighted backpack. Now treadmills have an incline, and from the research that I did, for every 2 degrees of incline you put on it, that's about 100 or 104 feet of elevation gain over the course of a mile, right? So I started off with an easy incline and worked my way up so that I didn't just jump right in and injure myself. And I got to the point where I could be doing a 10% incline on the treadmill with a weighted pack, which was the equivalent of about 500 feet of elevation gain over 1 mile. Towards the end, I was able to raise the incline up to 15%, which was the equivalent of 750 feet of elevation gain over a mile, which mimicked the canyon in many ways. However, things you don't get by training indoors is 1, a treadmill is a nice, solid, easy grade. It doesn't change. You're not moving. You're not having to deal with uneven terrain. And so if I had it to do over again, I would have gotten out that winter. I would have strapped my snowshoes on and done more of that. I would have gotten out. There's some good hills with stairs here in Seattle. I would have put my rain gear on, and I would have gotten out and done stairs in the rain. The other thing that a treadmill and a stair machine don't give you is a decline. Well, the treadmill in my gym would do a 6% decline, but that just wasn't enough to really mimic the canyon and going down the steepness. And so if I had it to do over again, I would find ways to get out and do some serious descent so that my legs were conditioned for that. When I ended up getting rhabdomyolysis, it seemed that the muscles that were impacted were the upper inner leg muscles that are used for going down. As I recovered, I was able to walk upstairs sooner than I was able to walk downstairs. So that is something I would definitely change next time, is training for the descent, because the Grand Canyon is a heck of a lot of descent, right? And it's not a nice smooth descent that's paved and an even grade. It's a lot of stairs stepping down, and a lot of stair steps that are built at mule size and are uneven. So lots of things went right with conditioning, but next time I would change that. Other things that went well with conditioning, I was able to drive down and make a road trip out of this. And so I went down the Eastern Sierras. I got snowshoeing in at altitude, up at 8,000, 9,000 and higher feet above sea level. So I started to get some elevation. I also visited my parents in Palm Springs. I was able to start doing hikes in Palm Springs in the desert where the temperatures were starting to get high. So I could do early morning hikes to beat the heat, but I was still conditioning in the heat, which was really valuable. And walking in the mountains near Palm Springs, a lot of those trails are steep and rugged. So I started to get some more stabilizer muscles and some things that were a little bit more like the Grand Canyon, or even steeper and a little more sketchy than the Grand Canyon. So those are the things that went well and that I would change about conditioning. Now, the next thing I think about is gear versus weight, right? When you're going a rim to rim to rim, you're looking at about 46 miles if you're not doing little side trips and depending on the route you take. And you're looking at about 11,000 feet of descent and 11,000 feet of ascent. So pack weight matters. Now, I ended up hiking solo. I had a hiking partner who had to back out due to some other plans in their life. So I was going solo. And I tend to carry a slightly heavier pack because I put extra things in just in case I get into trouble. And since I did get into trouble this time, I didn't need a lot of them, but I would carry some extra things just in case. For example, I carried rain gear. Well, there was not rain in the forecast. The weather can change quickly in the Grand Canyon. When I'd hiked in the canyon before, I had gone swimming at the bottom, it was warm enough, and I hiked into a blizzard with 2 inches of snow on the top. And so being ready for those weather changes, and especially when you're down there over the course of, 20 plus hours, being ready for those changes was important to me. Now, other things I brought, water filtration option. I brought my platypus gravity feed, but I also brought redundancy in the form of iodine tablets. When I hiked, the North Rim was closed, and the water pipeline was carrying water into many of the places in the canyon, not all, but it wasn't fit to drink yet, so I had to filter water. So why did I carry 2 things? Well, again, on a long hike over 46 miles, I didn't want to get stuck in the heat of the day or at any point have something wrong with my filter and not have a way to get water. So that's why I carried those backups. Now, another thing that adds to pack weight, but is essential to carry, is food. I have not historically been great about fueling my body when I'm on the trail and doing long hikes. And I've either gritted through or I have bonked on some of these longer hikes. And I knew that that would not work when it was a 46-mile hike in the canyon. So I decided to be really rigorous. I got the idea from Erica Rogers, Trail and Travel on YouTube, to set an alarm every hour and make sure that I consumed food, whether I was hungry or not. The research that I've done, and if any of you are nutritionists or doctors, I'd love to know if this is true or not, seems to be that the human body can absorb about 200 to 300 calories per hour when doing strenuous exercise, maybe even less. So from that perspective, I wasn't eating big meals. I started with a big dinner the night before. I had breakfast and a solid breakfast before I got on the trail. But then other than a planned kind of midway stops, I was taking, 200, 300 calories. A big thank you to all the staff at the REI and Flagstaff for talking me through their favorite trail snacks for energy. And I made sure that the snacks had some protein, but lots of carbs, and also electrolytes and salts because I was sweating so much of that out. Not sponsored here, although, hey, Sports Beans, if you want to sponsor me, one of my favorites was the Sports Jelly Beans. They had a little bit of caffeine in them, and I found that my body really wanted that, and that helped fuel me. So every hour, whether I was hungry or not, I made sure I ate. Now, I did take some stops along the way. When I got down to Phantom Ranch and had to filter, I ate something a little bit bigger. When I stopped at the North Rim, I had more food as well. And something that I had thought would work well and did at the beginning, but not further on, was nut butters. A lot of my friends who do endurance sports and ultra marathons said, Justin's nut butters are great for this. And I 100% agree, at least for my body, at the start. Made a lot of tortillas covered in nut butter and rolled up so I could eat those. Easy to eat on the go or while sitting down and filtering water. But I found that about 12 miles, 13 miles in, my body didn't want the heaviness of the nut butter anymore. And so if I had it to do over, I'd definitely take those for some of the stops, but I would have made fewer of the tortillas and I probably would have relied on more of the easy go-to snacks. I even found that some of the salty cashews, macadamia nuts, into the trail, once I was really starting to feel the trail, I didn't want to eat those things. So the sugary snacks with lots of carbs and electrolytes worked for me. And I would do more of those. And then lastly, something I would definitely change is electrolytes. I tend to drink a lot of water, more water than the average person. And I had my Camelback bladder that I was drinking out of. The challenge with that is you can't really drop hydration tabs into that, right? I like to use Noon. And so if I had to do over again, I would still use my hydration Camelback because that was easy just to take a sip. I didn't have to think about it. But I would have brought a backup Nalgene or some type of bottle that I could put water in and drop some electrolyte tabs or powders into to make it easier to consume. So definitely something I would do differently next time. So as we've talked about all of those bits, just a couple few little tips and tricks I'd like to talk about, and then we'll be done here. So thank you for sticking with me this long. One small one that worked for me is because I was solo hiking and I knew I was going down South Kaibab but coming up Bright Angel. So I was going to appear in a new place in the dark, really tired. The day before, I parked my car in the backcountry parking lot and walked from there down to the trailhead and back so that I knew the route because it twists and turns and there's little side trails that go through some of the buildings. Now, another that's helpful if you're a solo hiker or if you're group hikers who don't have folks who want to wake up and shuttle you in the middle of the night is there is a taxi on the South Rim. It runs 24 hours a day, and that phone number is on the National Park website. The taxi does not take reservations. It's a call when you arrive, and they'll come get you as soon as they can. But that wait can be anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, depending on how busy and where they're running people. And park staff use it to get around as well. So something that I would do again as a solo hiker would definitely use the taxi, which allowed me to get to South Kanab trailhead without having to hike all the way over. That saved me some mileage. But I would have called as soon as I got close to the backcountry lot. This case, I only had to wait about 10 or 12 minutes. But if it had been a longer wait, I would have called. It would have saved me time if I had called sooner. So I would have done that. Then last tip, until there's a bonus thought, last tip is what floor of the hotel to stay in. If you're staying in a cabin, this isn't such an issue, right? But I stayed in a motel in Tucson the night before, and I chose the ground floor because that was easy to get my tubs of gear in, take stuff out of the tubs, put them in the backpack, get everything into the car, get it all loaded up, and then in the morning it was easy just to walk out. I would not do this again. Motels, not the best insulated, and so no fault of the people above me. When they got up and walked around in the middle of the night, when they flushed their toilet, I heard all of that down below. And when I had a 3 a.m. alarm set, I was sleeping fairly lightly because I was already thinking, I don't want to miss my alarm. So I didn't sleep very much the night before. If I had it to do over again, I would stay on the second floor of the hotel so I didn't hear the people tromping around above me. So those are my tips and tricks and things that I would do again when it comes to scheduling, food, gear. The last bit I'll talk about is mindset, because mindset is so critical in the canyon. And something that worked for me and that I would do again was setting the intention of what type of hike I wanted to have. Now, having been in the canyon before, I knew it was a serious hike, and I could be in the best shape of my life, the best prepared, and still have things go wrong. And so early on, I set the intention that my goal was a safe hike and not completion. I said, if I need to, I will turn around as opposed to pressing on, because I would rather have a safe hike and be able to go back than have an unsafe hike and not be able to hike the canyon, or potentially not be able to hike anything else ever again. And this intention and mindset served me really well. As I started down the trail at 4:42 a.m., I reinforced it. I said a prayer for a beautiful hike, a wonderful hike, an enjoyable hike, but also a safe one. And I said, please, if I need to turn around, let me know and let me be smart enough to make that choice. So then, when 23.2 miles later, I started cramping badly, it was an easy choice. Well, it was hard for about 90 seconds as I sat there and thought, do I really want to? I probably just need more electrolytes. I can push on. But then as I thought about what it would take to get down the North Rim, the fact that it was going to take me farther and farther from help, that parts of the trail were hard to get to, and if something really went wrong, I was going to be a statistic. And I was going to be backboarded out of there by search and rescue into a helicopter if I was lucky. Now, I ended up being a statistic anyway, but I was able to hike back to the North Rim, call for help. And now when I shared with search and rescue on the phone that I had turned around and was calling for help, the woman on the other end said, "What? You turned around?" In all my time working here, I've only known a few people who have turned around when they should have. Now, this is not to pat myself on the back, but it's to say that by creating the right intention early on, it made it easier to turn around, and many people don't. And if you followed the news this year about all the deaths in the canyon, many of those were preventable. They were all preventable, right? But walking in prepared, but knowing that preparedness also means sometimes you don't keep pushing forward. So if I had it to do again, and when I do it again, because I do plan to go back one of these days for rim to rim to rim, I will go back with more conditioning, with different food, all of those things. I will still walk in with the intention that I want a safe hike, and I would rather bail on the hike and live to hike another day than to try to push it and become a statistic. And as I like to say, the Colorado River is continuing to erode the canyon, so it's just going to be a little bit more of a challenge next time because the canyon will be that much deeper. So these are all the things that went well for me, that I would do again, that I would change. I haven't really talked about my experience with rhabdomyolysis. I wanted to keep this really on the planning section of it. If folks are interested in that, let me know and I can do another video on that. And if you have specific questions about the gear, about how I planned, logistics, any of those things, let me know in the comments below. And I'll either answer them in the comments, or if you think it's worth it, I'm happy to take ideas for other videos. So with that, thank you all for sticking with me. As you're planning your trip to the Grand Canyon, whether you stay above the rim and just walk along the paved sections, whether you go partway down the rim to Ooh-Ah Point, Skeleton Point, Havasupai Gardens, whether you're playing a rim to rim or a rim to rim to rim, I wish you a very wonderful time in the canyon. Happy trails to y'all, and cheers until next time.
Coco Nino overlook. Not a bad view.